Koutou katoa. My name's Paul Blair. I'm the CEO of Infrastructure New Zealand, and I'd like to welcome you to our latest webinar, which is on a pretty new and exciting initiative, 2 years old now, the Hamilton to Auckland corridor. So this is bringing together 4 different parties. We've got some fantastic speakers for you representing some of the private sector, local government, central government, and also iwi interests. So there's 3 key purposes for this webinar today. It's really about raising some awareness for you of what the Hamilton to Auckland corridor is, and we'll be lucky to have the Minister speak to this shortly. It's to highlight a number of projects that are going to come through this process for you, and also to talk about the new tools and techniques that we're going to need, sort of spatial planning, transport planning, a new approach to working in partnership in order to get this Hamilton to Auckland urban corridor up and running, given that the projections are that there's going to be another 300,000 people that are going to make this home over the next 30 years, and we do need a different approach. So by now you will all be absolute experts at Zoom webinars and so on and so forth. So please just understand no use of the chat function, but we're really keen to understand that you use the question and answer function. If you have a look at the agenda that we will put up now, you'll see that we have significant time at the back end for Q&A. So we'll do about 20 minutes of Q&A. So please make sure that you use those questions to get key value out of this. And now, without further ado, what we're going to do is punch through the presentations really quickly. So it is my great pleasure to welcome a frequent visitor to these webinars. So this is the Honourable Minister Phil Twyford, wearing, as usual, multiple hats, his transport, his urban development and economic development hats. It's been a very big week in the urban growth space. We've had an infrastructure funding and financing bill land. We've had Kāinga Ora be given special powers as an urban development agency. We've had further work, and we will see more at about 10 o'clock today. In my understanding, Tony Randerson QC will present his reform of the resource management bill. So a huge amount going on, a huge importance in us getting this urban corridor right. And without further ado, I'd love to welcome Minister Phil Twyford to start his address. Thank you, Minister.
Morena koutou. Thank you, Paul. It's great to be back with Infrastructure New Zealand, talking about not only one of my favourite areas of responsibility, urban development, but the Hamilton to Auckland corridor work, which I think is a tremendously exciting project that's breaking the mould and doing things differently as we join up transport, economic development, land use regulation, housing growth and infrastructure in a highly collaborative 30-year growth planning partnership. This is, in my view, really cutting edge stuff, and I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to have a bit of a conversation this morning, and to also to be on the panel with Mayor Paula from Hamilton, with Clive from Kiwi, and Chris Joblin from Tainui Group Holdings. We're talking about this corridor, and the reason that we made this corridor a priority piece of work within the government's urban growth agenda, and within there are 6 of these regional spatial planning partnerships. But this one, the Hamilton to Auckland corridor, was probably the first cab off the rank. It is, I think, one of the most advanced amongst these regional spatial plans, and it's got enormous potential, I think, to transform and get some really fantastic outcomes out of what is one of the busiest and most economically important corridors in the whole country. Let me start with some of the problems that we're trying to solve here. If you look at the way that New Zealand cities have historically underperformed in terms of productivity, you can see a whole lot of symptoms on this slide that are really the downstream consequences of policy failure, which inhibits the proper workings of markets. The symptoms: very high urban land prices, flat productivity, real and discretionary household incomes not growing as they should, rising housing costs and traffic congestion that really inhibits the mobility that is a prerequisite for our cities and key corridors to work properly. So what are we doing? We're trying to take a new approach here. We've been trying to, way in advance of the reform of the RMA, which, as Paul mentioned, we're about to announce some progress on that this morning. But in advance of that, for the last 3 years, we thought, let's just crack into it and demonstrate a new approach to growth planning and to infrastructure. You know, the RMA is based on this idea that kind of development's a bad thing and you have to mitigate its effects. And we've said, actually, no, development's a good thing. Let's plan it. Let's be deliberate about it. Let's have a 30-year growth plan and start with what kind of community and what kind of economy do we want to build here and pass on to our kids. And then let's work together with all of the key economic leadership in the room and see what kind of magic we can work. And you can see on this slide, in the Waikato, there was already a fully functioning and highly developed collaboration between the economic leadership of a region. Future-proof is what it's called. Already a set of relationships with iwi at the table as key actors there, multiple councils. And that's really important because we know that the way markets work and the way freight movements work and housing markets and employment markets, they pay no attention to the governance boundaries of council. So very important to take a kind of a regional, and in this case, a corridor-based approach. What we've been trying to do is spatial planning. It's taking a spatial and a spatial economics view of a whole region. It's not a micromanaging right down to the granular neighbourhood level. It's a helicopter view, looking at the big trends, the opportunities, the challenges, and identifying the big moves that will make a difference. So here we've got some of the key elements of work that have arisen out of the spatial planning work. We started with Three Waters, and that's a critical thing, not only for the environment, but also for any kind of growth and development. And so Three Waters has been a big part of the work that we've done. Next thing is really stronger corridor connections. This is, as I said, one of the busiest and most economically significant corridors for the movement of both people and freight. One of the defining issues really is that State Highway 1, and particularly the Southern Motorway north of the Bombay Hills, is this massive bottleneck. And while growth is spilling out south of Auckland over the Bombay Hills and down to the northern Waikato, what we know is that at the moment it's highly car dependent, and all of the growth that's happening in the south there has to be funneled onto the Southern Motorway. And overcoming that dependence on that terrible bottleneck is one of the big challenges that we've got. And of course, the answer is a more multimodal, diverse transport solution. And so using rail, building the new development in Auckland's southern suburbs around rail and down into northern Waikato, and the idea of intercity rail between Hamilton and Auckland, including this vision that we have of rapid intercity rail that would reduce that journey from Hamilton to Auckland down to about an hour. Those improvements, alongside the incredible connectivity that the Waikato region has as a result of a decade and a half's investment in the motorway network. Other elements that we've got, you can see three key zones in the corridor, the Papakura Pokeno. As I said, this is an area that's experiencing massive growth pressures coming out of Auckland, and yet we've had some pretty poor outcomes over the last decade. How do we get better outcomes there? The river communities, None of them have the topography that will allow them to become huge cities in future, but they're very, very special communities, and they are at the heart of this region's identity, and we want to give them some love and give them the opportunity to develop and strengthen those communities. And then Hamilton-Waikato, which I think is an enormously exciting opportunity, a city with tremendous growth potential, right in the heart of the export-producing Waikato heartland. It's got tons of land, good developable land to grow into. It's got great road connectivity. It has a heavy rail network that is there but is relatively unused and could be the basis of a rapid transit network and public transport system of the future. In so many ways, Hamilton offers New Zealand's best opportunity to be a high growth and prosperous city with affordable housing and a highly functionable and livable and affordable housing and urban land market. So those are some of the key elements in the plan. I think we've got one more slide here, which is really about the corridor and what are the things that we can do to kind of unleash the area's growth potential. So intercity rail, we later on this year we will be inaugurating this startup passenger service between Hamilton and Auckland. That's been a partnership between central government and the councils in the region, and it's going to offer people a genuine alternative for people who need to commute between Hamilton and Auckland, a genuine alternative to sitting in motorway traffic on the Southern Motorway. And we've just completed a business case for the idea of truly rapid rail, a future rapid rail service between the two cities that would effectively unite these two labour markets. Like I said, the extending high frequency modern electric commuter rail down through Auckland's southern suburbs. We are building with the support alongside the developers, and Clive from Kiwi will talk more about Drury, but building a new town or a new city the size of Napier around two railway stations. This is a new approach to transit-oriented development in our cities, and extending that rail network out to electrification to Pukekohe, and then I hope further on south to Tuakau and Pōkeno into the northern Waikato. This is the way that we can sustainably support urban growth in Auckland's southern reaches. All right, let me finish there and hand over to the next speakers, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Minister. As always, fantastic overview, and unusual for New Zealand to be having this sort of integrated land use discussion. So I think that's a brilliant overview. Really, thank you for that. And what I wanted to do now is introduce Clive Mackenzie, who's the CEO of Kiwi. And you would have seen that this is one of the exemplar developments we're looking at one end of the corridor, and that Pōkeno Papakura corridor around Drury. So Clive, really keen to hear from you about your experience and what it is to actually potentially plan a town centre that might have transport there and utilities before you actually turn up.
Great. Thank you, Paul, and good morning, everyone. Morning, Minister Twyford, Mayor Southgate, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to everyone today. For those of you that don't know, Kiwi Property is one of the country's largest property companies. We have a portfolio which includes assets such as Sylvia Park in Auckland, as well as the base in Hamilton, which we jointly own with Tainui. We believe our development at Drury will stand alongside all those assets as one of the largest and most ambitious projects we've ever undertaken. And over the next 10 to 20 years, developers such as Kiwi Property, alongside council and the government, are going to spend billions of dollars to build a new city at Drury and creating tens of thousands of jobs in the process. So this is an incredible opportunity and one which we're extremely excited about. If we go to the next slide, you'll see here that this render shows what we think our land holding at Drury will evolve into over time. Our vision is to provide an outstanding residential, a commercial, entertainment and retail experience south of Auckland. We want to create a thriving mixed-use community where people from around the region will come to shop, work, live and play. And Drury is set to be New Zealand's largest urban growth area. According to the 2019 structure plan, which was approved by council, we'll have around 22,000 homes and a population of 60,000. And as the minister said, about the same size as Napier. So pre-COVID-19, Auckland was expected to grow by about 720,000 people to reach a population of 2.4 million people over the next 30 years. Following the emergence of COVID-19, we believe this is likely to accelerate, with tens of thousands of Kiwis coming home to escape the pandemic. So we need to create jobs, we need to create homes and opportunities for them, and we think that Drury has the potential to do just that. One of the most important things about our proposed development at Drury is the aligned approach being taken by industry, council and central government. And we're working closely with a range of private and public sector partners who have a shared vision for high quality, transit-oriented city, which the council has supported in a structure plan. We believe that coordinated approach will lead to a much better outcome for all the stakeholders, including, most importantly, the people and businesses that will one day call Drury their home. In West Drury, Charles Maher has lodged a private plan change, while in the east, Fulton Hogan, Oyster Capital and Kiwi Property have lodged 3 private plan changes to develop the eastern land into approximately 7,000 homes and 6,000 long-term jobs. The 3 plan changes in the east are interlinked and provide for connected walkways, cycleways, roads and public spaces, one of which is shown here. So this is our vision for the town centre, including restaurants, cafes, green spaces, and the repurposed Flanagan Homestead. Kiwi Property is targeting a 5 Green Star Communities rating and are focused on ensuring Drury is easily walkable and has excellent public transport connectivity via bus and train, as the minister alluded to. The map on the next slide shows the government is also stepping up to accelerate progress at Drury. Through NZ Upgrade, the Crown has provided key bulk infrastructure ahead of time, including the approval of $2.4 billion of road and rail improvements to connect Auckland with the Waikato and Bay of Plenty. The funding allocated for State Highway 1 between Papakura and Drury South along Mill Road, as well as the Drury Central Train Station and Papakura to Pukekohe rail electrification, will be transformative for the region and provide much needed employment post-COVID-19. In addition, the government has developed in conjunction with the council a 30-year infrastructure implementation plan, which to my knowledge is the first time such an approach has been taken. The Crown's proposed investment highlights the strategic importance of Drury and the government's desire for development in the region to move at pace. It's clear a piecemeal BAU approach isn't going to be enough to achieve our collective ambitions for the area, and a coordinated approach is required to deliver this collective vision. Private enterprise has stepped up, drafting a package of plan changes in line with the structure plan, and it's great to see that these have been approved by Auckland Council for public notification. We're focused on working with Council to develop sensible solutions around the phasing of infrastructure and areas such as the new Drury Central Train Station, which will be integrated into the new town centre, as shown on this slide. We have engaged global industry leaders such as Civitas from Canada and Hoyne from Australia, and that have experience in building high quality, transit-orientated towns, and also have spent the time to make sure that the new town has a heart so the community can thrive. Drury is a huge opportunity, and we're committed to playing our part to create a thriving, dynamic community south of Auckland. We're really looking forward to getting through to the next round of the RMA processes and getting into the construction phase. So with that, I'll pass back to you, Paul.
Oh, Clive, thank you very much. Well, apologies. It's very rare in New Zealand we actually have one of these integrated sort of live, work, play communities. So I think the visuals are really, really important actually to give a sense to Kiwis of what is possible here. It's quite common overseas. It's not so common here. Infrastructure New Zealand, of course, a very strong advocate. Our Innovation City approach from several years ago really talked to this sort of approach, and perhaps that string of pearls heading down to Hamilton has some opportunities there as well. So thanks very much for your talk there. So now I wanted to introduce Mayor Paula Southgate. Mayor Southgate is going to talk to us about the Hamilton-Waikato Metro Spatial Plan And I don't think I'm blowing smoke to say that Hamilton has been one of the councils that has been one of the more progressive in the country around the urban growth agenda, and in particular about being front-footed with coming in on the partnership approach, which is a very different approach to perhaps some of the more adversarial approaches that we've had in the past. So Mayor Southgate, would love to hear from you on your talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Minister. In fact, thank you, Minister, for the high-level overview that you gave of H2A, because I think that gives context to the element I'm going to talk to, which is the Hamilton-Waikato spatial plan, which was covered off in the yellow boxes on some of the diagrams that we've already seen. So what's new about this, as Paula's alluded to, is that it's a very well-formed partnership. And we're particularly grateful, for example, to have at the table Crown Ministers alongside us every step of the way. And we think that adds great value and a great strength to it in terms of the thinking that's occurring in Wellington and some of the tools that we're seeing coming out. We also have a strong coalition of councils, and in particular with the Hamilton-Waikato spatial plan, Waikato Waipa and the likes, but other councils are also involved in this, and iwi. So we have all the right people around the table, and the Minister mentioned Future Proof, which is a very well-formed partnership of all the Waikato councils around the central Hamilton, but it wasn't modern and responsive at the point that we came in with this. We needed to create a plan that was much more focused on the possibilities going forward, and that recognised that we're in a new growth scenario and we needed to be more agile and actually more aggressive in tackling some of the issues that we're facing, roading, water and the likes. And this plan assumes that in a scenario of 500,000 population can easily be accommodated in a manner which still takes care of many other aspects. So in this slide, we can see that we are looking at a range of different things overlaying that are important. Strategic transport corridors, which are paramount, but also environmental overlay, the growth of urban areas, how that fits in, and iwi interests are all covered off in this spatial plan. So we'll go to the next slide. Thank you. So the plan does draw on a very strong analysis of the region. It's different from any plan that we've done before because it is data-based and features around a transport scenario. Hang on, I can't find my right thing. So this means improving on our current performance indicators to look at where we can develop in a more affordable, sustainable way, and where jobs and key facilities will be more easily accessible from where you live. So it talks to the live, work and play aspect. We believe that this will be a benefit to both Hamilton but also to New Zealand Inc., as we certainly will add great value to the economy in the central North Island. And of course we have that location advantage of being close to Auckland and close to Tauranga as well. We believe that if we strengthen our connections with both Auckland, which the Minister was talking about through H2A, but we also maintain our strength with the Bay of Plenty, we'll get greater outcomes, and this is what this seeks to do. As you can see, with the arrows pointing out into the wider area to draw in the benefits of a much bigger geography. I'll just move on to the next one. So it's an evolving spatial approach. There's a lot of detail on this slide, as you can see, and we've got a wonderful map that looks a little bit like the London Underground. And that is because we are schematically looking at how we're going to move people around in our geography. We believe that the river is a pivotal part of our communities from Lake Taupo right to Port Waikato, and that communities live and grow up alongside that. And of course, that's our access for a large part to water as well. We think that a rapid rail transport corridor will be pivotal to New Zealand's success and will certainly maximise that location advantage that I was talking about before. And as you can see from this map, we're looking at how we can make ourselves into much more of a 20-minute connection within the city, but also reach out to some of the key towns and places around Hamilton, such as Morrinsville, Te Awamutu, Cambridge, that in themselves are small, thriving economies, and how we can help each other off in that respect. I'll just move on to the next one. Hang on, sorry, just got to get down there. Okay, so the whole plan is predicated on the idea that to get the economic gains, we need jobs. So we've got a clear agglomeration of jobs along the economic corridor that aligns with the transport spine. The metro area benefits from the strong regional economy. Ruakura, University of Waikato, the Hamilton CBD, the DHB. Of course, recently we were very lucky and we were able to do a very strong bid for the NZIST, the New Zealand Institute of Skills and Technology. We've also got Hamilton Airport. Ports of Auckland have a base in Horutiu. Ruakura, which Chris is going to talk to shortly, is developing an inland port at Ruakura. And we have the bare bones of an excellent rail infrastructure. Speaking of which, we are able to connect with ports of Tauranga and any future developments with ports north of Hamilton as well. So we're taking a very keen interest in that with all our partners. So we have 3 areas in our spatial plan that function together along that transport corridor, but have different needs and different opportunities. So as you can see with the northern corridor, that is where logistics and our ability to connect with the ports and with Auckland is going to be really important. It's going to be important to be able to leave Hamilton swiftly and end up in the other thriving economy of Auckland as quickly as possible. In our central corridor, central Hamilton, we've got a different proposition that's all about maximising the opportunity to live, work and play in the CBD, to create a 20-minute city where you can get to work potentially on passenger transport, rapid forms of transport, whether that be rail or rapid railless forms of transport, cycling, walking. So we want to give people the opportunity to live and move around the city in a completely different way. The southern corridor is very important because, of course, it is the link to Hamilton's airport as well. It's also a very key point from the agricultural sector as well, connecting us with prime productive land. We are building a very large subdivision in there, and we're setting the bar quite high. We want to see that as a place which has high environmental values, the best of modern transportation, and a diversity of housing types for all Hamiltonians. And so that's one of the focuses in that. And I'll probably leave it there because I know that there are a lot of questions, for example, that were coming in around the 20-minute city, and I'd be quite happy to answer those at that time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Southgate. You've stolen my words. 20-minute city is definitely going to be a question that's going to come up later on. I love the approach to housing outcomes that you're putting there, especially around affordability and the links between transport and jobs. So again, I think as we move to new housing dashboards out of HUD and out of perhaps more regional spatial groups, it'd be great to see those type of transparent metrics around housing. Also like the link to bring in the hinterland. It's not town versus country, it is economic geographies. I think that's really important. So finally, before we pass on to our next speaker, just a reminder that to bring those questions in, we've got the Minister and all of our panellists with us. You can also upweight those questions by liking them. So please put your zingers towards the top of the list. Give us some tough questions for these folk. So now it's my great privilege to introduce Chris Joblin. Chris is the CEO of Tainui Group Holdings. And representing, I suppose, at the southern end, one of the iwi partners in this really important corridor, some major growth plans, and has been a long champion of some integrated development. So, Chris, would love to hear from you about the Tainui story as part of this overall H2A corridor. Thank you.
Morena koutou. Thanks, Paul. Minister Twyford, Mayor Paula, Clive. Yeah, great to hear the energy and the passion that's going into developing opportunities along the corridor. And today, what I'd like to do is just share a little bit about Ruakura and what we're doing there, because this will anchor one end of the corridor as we develop out into the future. So many of you will be familiar with the concept of the Ruakura Superhub, and I'll just sort of touch on this briefly. So Ruakura is 480 hectares, so that's a little bit larger than the Auckland CBD. So if you think about an area of land that goes from the Auckland Harbour Bridge to Parnell and up to the top of Queen Street, that gives you sort of a feel for the scale. And that's nestled on the eastern side of Hamilton. And through that block of land, you've got the East Coast Main Trunk Line for rail, and you've also got the Waikato Expressway, which is nearing completion. So some really key pieces of national infrastructure and a piece of land that has absolute scale. And that's really important when you think about the ability to make intermodal decisions and changes around productivity, which enables our country to really grow. So in the box there in the top right, you've got a just sort of an artist's impression of what it looks like, and just sort of for scale, looking from sort of top left to bottom right, it's about 5.5 kilometres long, and at its widest piece, about 3.5 kilometres wide. So 480 hectares rolls off the tongue, but a lot harder to walk around. So we're calling it a super hub, and there's a range of precincts, with interrelated uses, and this is really important. And when we look at our priorities, it starts with the top there with the port area in orange. And so that's an intermodal terminal utilising road and rail, but primarily rail. And then anchored off that, you've got the adjacent logistics, industrial, service centre and wider environmental pieces of the estate. And again, how these work and interlink together are really important to enable the efficient movement of freight and to get the productivity gains for cargo owners. In February of this year, we announced plans to team up with Port of Tauranga to develop the inland port, and you've got graphics there on the slide. So this JV will basically bring together the port piece for Ruakura, and we're well down the track of getting this going. And we expect that this will open in early 2022 in alignment with the completion of the Waikato Expressway. And rail's absolutely critical, to the success of this project. And again, bring those intermodal pieces together of road and rail, and ultimately bringing freight off road onto rail and creating the efficiency that comes from that. So you've got Kiwi Rail and Port of Tauranga run about 90 train services a week through this site. And you've got in Ruakura, you'll have a double track full siding, which enables things to move efficiently and smoothly. So construction for the port itself will begin in October, and will complete in alignment with the expressway. Sort of moving forward, we're also currently putting in a bunch of their supporting infrastructure. So Hamilton City is close to commissioning a new 12.4 megalitre water reservoir, which will supply the Ruakura and wider catchments within Hamilton City. And thanks, Minister, we're really delighted with the announcement of the $16.8 million PGF grant, towards the infrastructure of Ruakura and supporting $5 million from Hamilton City. What that does is enable what we call the spine road, but putting the connecting infrastructure between Hamilton City via Ruakura to the expressway. So opening up those connections from a roading point of view which then enable, those intermodal uses to be unlocked. So in alignment with the port, the construction of this work around the roads, etc., will begin at the start of the new construction season in October. One of the other things that's really important with Ruakura is what it does for sustainability. When you're talking about 65,000 truck movements off the road a year, the carbon impact of that is massive. When you look at one of the reasons why people are looking at Ruakura, sustainability is a big part of that. And, how we've chosen to develop the site, a lot like what Clive has described, is making use of green corridors, swales, wetlands, so that we can bring that environmental, impact, or minimise environmental impact, and have a real sustainable view towards the development. But also making those spaces available for the public as well. So, kilometres of walkways, millions of trees, all these things that just create quite a unique environment. And again, connecting in with that live, work, play mantra, which is really important. So one of the other things I'd just like to touch on also is, whilst Ruakura is at the southern end of the Hamilton to Auckland corridor, we also hold some very strategic pieces of whenua land along the other points of the expressway and the Hamilton-Auckland corridor as well. So whilst our focus today is on Ruakura, you can see from this map that we will over time be developing some other very strategic nodes along the corridor. And again, that long-term planning through the corridor are really important, so that we can map out and plan these things as we go, and maximise the efficiency and the job opportunities along the way. So the last thing that I'd like to touch on is, Ruakura is one thing that we do, but we've got a very strong focus on investment, and particularly in the COVID environment or post-COVID environment, we see that we have an absolutely critical role in how the economy grows and recovers. So in that sense, we take an intergenerational approach, and that means that we will continue to invest. And some of the things that we're doing at the moment, so top right, we're building a building for ACC, which will be roughly 10,000 square metres, and that will start in October as well. We've recently completed an additional 40 rooms to our Novotel Hotel here in Hamilton, which is top left. And then on the bottom right, you've got the Te Ariki Nui Pullman Hotel, which is currently under development in Auckland, at Auckland Airport, in partnership with Auckland Airport. So you can see from what I've said today that October is going to be a pretty busy month for us, with a bunch of big projects on the go. But we see this as really important to supporting our communities and creating employment opportunities that are going to activate our economy, post the challenges of COVID. So we're really proud of what we do and the opportunity that Ruakura presents, not only for our owners, but for the country as a whole. And the productivity and the value creation that this is going to create for our nation, I think, is really, really important. And we look forward to showing you all around. So happy to take any questions in the Q&A session. So thanks, Paul.
Oh, many thanks, Chris. As always, big vision there. And it's, I think the key point I picked up out of that as well is that with long-term certainty of a plan, an intergenerational investor like you can actually put your money to work there. I think also really interesting from an iwi perspective to formally be in that co-governance and also have an ability to distribute jobs and further opportunities through your wider iwi as well. So thank you very much for that. So look, we're pretty much right on time. Good to see the questions coming through. I think what we'll do now is we'll start to pass these through. So congratulations to James, the most popular question there. So I think this is one that's going to go for Mayor Southgate and also for the Minister. How about we start with you, Mayor Southgate? Does the new urban development policy, the NPS on urban development policy, support the metro spatial plan approach? And then I think you might be able to split that off to the policy and investment question going to Minister Twyford.
Well, the short answer to that is yes, it does. It's absolutely consistent. We've been working on this for quite a long time. Of course, we have had Crown input quite clearly with the Minister's involvement, and this has been we've been shaping government thinking and vice versa. So we do believe that it's a very consistent approach, and is setting us up well actually to implement what is required.
Excellent. Minister, perhaps the policy and investment piece of that question.
So the policy and investment, in terms of policy, the approach that we've taken here in the corridor work has really been an exemplar, I think, of this highly collaborative 30-year integrated growth planning approach. And it is, and I'm really pleased also, Paul, that in the work of the RMA review panel released this morning, take a look at that, folks, because you'll see that the panel has picked up on the work that we've been doing, not only in the Waikato, but also in several other regions around New Zealand. And they're proposing in the new post-RMA world 2 bits of legislation. One of those new laws would be a strategic planning law that would institutionalise exactly the approach that we've taken here in the Hamilton-Auckland growth corridor. And that's very gratifying from my point of view. And of course, there's a long way to go in that RMA reform process, but the panel has made a very, very clear proposal here. So, but we're cracking on with this work in advance of the legislative reform. And so I hope that we're going to move straight to the investment stage and start implementing some of these big projects, and that's very exciting.
Excellent. And I think, I'm not sure if you're able to answer this one. I think the RMA reforms are pretty much out, but a question from Grant around how do you see those spatial planning mechanisms being given statutory teeth, I think is one of the ways describing it.
Yeah, so I think what the way I see it, I think this is consistent with what the review panel has released this morning, and certainly what I'm arguing for within the government is that we've got to reform not only the RMA, but the Land Transport Management Act and the Local Government Act, so that the statutory mechanism for this requires regions to do 30-year collaborative growth planning on a regional basis that fully integrates. So councils will no longer do a siloed standalone transport plan. Their transport plan will exist, it will be nested within this integrated, longer integrated land use spatial planning document, which will have a longer term horizon. I think that'll be a massive step forward for us. And certainly that sort of integration has been one of the key themes in the last 3 years of urban development work that I've been leading for the government.
Fantastic. And look, this is one that probably can go to Chris and then perhaps Clive as well. It's more beyond that bulk transport infrastructure. What about the utilities, water and power and so on, some of which are council, some of which are private? So maybe Chris first, you mentioned the water infrastructure. How are you seeing the coordination of wider utilities and greenfields development that you're undertaking?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I think that's a great question. So from our perspective, we look at it how we create embedded networks and how we, again, with that vision of sustainability, how do we, for example, use our roof space for solar and regenerate that through the site, or, hydrogen for forecourts and so on. So, what we're looking to do is to minimise our footprint, if you like, on our site, and how we embed those networks and join those up. And we see infrastructure or enabling infrastructure not only to create, I guess, lower cost barriers for our tenants, but also to create much better environmental outcomes as well from the estate.
And Clive, to follow on for you, again, are you finding that easy, hard, the right price, the wrong price?
Yeah. And I just want to concur with what Chris said in terms of, obviously the environmental awareness side and the infrastructure around that. But from a Drury perspective, we've been working closely with Watercare in terms of the provision of water and wastewater services, and we've had a really good outcome with them, and we've teamed up with a number of developers to help fund that infrastructure. Obviously, the roading infrastructure, the minister's spoken to, and obviously Auckland Council's heavily involved in that. And that's really the key enabler, and bringing that rail connection into Drury will help free up a lot of that infrastructure as well in the growth.
Yeah.
Paul, if I could just make a comment, please, that would be lovely.
Sure.
Just in respect to that, because there's a big part, like you said, what councils do. Part of the success around that is the boundaryless planning, and that's where we're focused at across the Waikato, Hamilton-Waikato Metro Spatial Plan with Three Waters. So we're working across boundaries to co-fund, co-develop solutions to the future water needs. And in actual fact, in saying that, we're very supportive of the government's move to review how Three Waters are carried out. So it's all about scale and economy and efficiency. And if we all work within our own small borders, we won't get the best outcome on any of those scores, cost effectiveness or efficiency. So it's really important to think across boundaries to get the best value here.
Yeah, I really support that, and thank you for talking about the Three Waters, because that has been a major piece of work. And again, I think the approach that you took with the smaller councils and your wider economic geography, I suppose that's very consistent with the approach that we're looking at in the Three Waters. So I think what I understood is that there might be 14 large-scale areas that we're looking at in the RMA reform area, perhaps 3 to 5 or so in the water space. So we are looking at scale for these infrastructure players, so big opportunity. Back to a lot of discussion on multimodal and trains, which have been an interesting space in New Zealand, a bit neglected for a long time, big government investment process. Minister, what would it take to extend beyond rapid rail? You mentioned rapid rail all the way through to express trains. We tend to focus on the cost, but lovely to hear about the value from you as well.
So, Paul, I hope to quite soon release the initial business case that has been done to support this idea of rapid rail along this corridor between Hamilton and Auckland. It's a fascinating piece of work that not only looks at different options in terms of building a whole new rail alignment, a whole new line that would allow express trains to run both between Hamilton and Auckland CBDs, but also enough capacity on the line that could also support stops along the way. And of course, there's a trade-off between the speed of the total journey and servicing those development nodes along the alignment. There's been some fascinating modelling done on the effect of the amenity uplift and the value uplift that you get in communities because of those new transport connections. So the business case identifies and does modelling against a number of different options, and you can see where the total expense, the engineering options, and the cost benefit, and the modelling on value uplift. The concept that underlies all this for us has been that, the Waikato's got fantastic road connectivity because of the investment in motorways. The southern motorway in Auckland is a huge bottleneck that we've got to solve. But if we put rail, high quality rail alongside this network, then we will set the region up for 100 years of growth. Because if the rail service is good enough quality, when the roads get a bit full, enough people will then choose to use the rail network. That will allow the road, and if the rail network moves very at speed and with efficiency, that will allow the roads to move with speed and efficiency too. It's a kind of dynamic equilibrium. That's the kind of sweet spot. And if we can solve that mobility problem, it unlocks growth and livability across the whole corridor.
Fantastic. A question, perhaps go to Chris on this. Clive may want to chip in too, but it's really around actually population growth. We've had COVID, it's been quite a shock. We've heard different things about the housing markets rising, it's collapsing, population's growing, it's not. Chris, do you have a view on that? And then over to Clive.
Yeah, I think within our region, the population is going to continue to grow. So Hamilton is a young city, and in terms of age demographic, and Hamilton, or I guess the corridor cities, Tauranga, Hamilton-Auckland, population is going to grow regardless of COVID. And as we're seeing more New Zealanders come back, they are going to reside in this region. So I think regardless of what's happening, you're going to see continued population growth in this area.
Clive, you're bullish, short-term, long-term?
Yeah, look, I think, obviously COVID's hopefully a short-term blip for the global economy and for New Zealand in particular. But, in the Golden Triangle, and especially in Auckland, there's huge population pressure coming on infrastructure and housing, and that's not going to go away. So, we're very bullish on that, and we think, you need a whole suite of solutions for that, whether it's Kiwi Build or, housing provision in terms of build to rent or other forms of housing to try and alleviate that demand. So yeah, we're very bullish on it going forward.
I'm going to keep you there. Peter Silcock's asking how businesses, education and health providers get involved in Drury.
Yeah, well, it's all about certainty about when development will start in Drury. And so, my compliments to the Minister has really been the champion of Drury in terms of the provision of that key infrastructure, along with the Mayor and Deputy Mayor of Auckland. But, some of those key enablers are around education, and I know the Ministry of Education is getting heavily involved in locating schools, but and the Ministry of Health is starting to look at Drury as a potential new regional hospital site, and I think that would be a fantastic catalyst to help spur that development. So all that civic type infrastructure will be fantastic to help lead the way and give a reason for people not just to use it as a dormitory location, but also a place where they can actually create employment as well. So we don't want people just living there and then commuting into Auckland. We actually want to create that employment. And we're starting to see quite a lot of businesses now starting to put their hand up and say, hey, we want to be located in Drury now that we can see some certainty coming around timing.
Fantastic. Mayor Paula, 20-minute city. This has been quite a bit of a discussion around that, and we've seen actually some global stuff around 30-minute cities and so on and so forth. Do you want to explain a little bit more about what that is? Because I personally like the vision aspect of it, but it'll mean different things to different people. Yeah.
Absolutely. So we're very excited about this because it's about a connectedness between all parts of your spatial plan. So in terms of creating the opportunity for fast types of transport and a choice, walking, cycling, maybe even trackless trams, whatever, shared car fleets, all of those kind of modern ideas of transport that will be able to move you where you need to go. So you have to have all the development going where it should be as well, so that you've got nodes where people can walk to their shops, to their schools, to health services, or cycle. And they should be able to do this within a 20-minute framework, because we're not a massive city in terms of geography. And if everything's moving, as the Minister says, if you get things moving at the right pace, then you get that wonderful opportunity to really get anywhere you're going quite quickly, and the economic benefits of that are quite good. But it is all about how we've laid out the spatial plan to be really deliberate about where we allow communities to grow, and that will be around the opportunity for transportation. But it will also mean that the sort of core facilities that you'd expect to find in any community, and the amenities as well, recreation parks, green space, and that kind of thing, are also provided within that 20-minute opportunity.
That's fantastic. New concept. Do you have the tools and the funding that you need to do that? And if not, then who would you need to bring on the journey?
Well, I think we do, because it is very much lined up with the whole aspiration of the Hamilton to Auckland, Waikato Hamilton Metro Spatial Plan has been predicated on really good data and really good growth data, really good business data, and really robust conversations around transport. And we're very grateful to the government for supporting a number of initiatives in transport. We're looking forward to more good news coming out of government in the long term around the infrastructure funding, so that we can crack on, because I know that Minister Twyford, you're a massive fan of this approach also, and it is about working in partnership with government to get the timing right about how we develop in that area.
So look, very conscious Minister Twyford needs to go. What I'm going to offer is the very final word to you, Minister Twyford, if you'd like to wrap this up. If you wanted to, there's a final question there about the tauranga leg of the Golden Triangle. But over to you just before you have to go, and then I will wrap up.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, look, I've really appreciated the opportunity to be part of this conversation this morning. For my money, this is one of the most innovative and exciting pieces of work right across transport, urban growth, housing, cities, and it's been great to do it with such a great partnership of people. I really think that we are pioneering a new way of doing this stuff in New Zealand. And one of the, we've talked a lot about transport and infrastructure and urban growth and so on, but I just wanted to finish on a point that it's the quality of the development that we're striving for that's the really important thing here. And one of the revelations of having Waikato Tainui at the table right from the beginning to help set the vision and establish a kind of a set of values that is the foundation for this work. We put the river right at the heart of the whole idea. This kind of ancient and metaphysical presence of a river running right through this corridor has grounded the whole thing in a perspective that goes way beyond supply and demand and the bricks and mortar of infrastructure. And we've sought to set aside areas of special value for future generations that are spiritual, ecological, recreational, open spaces for future generations. That's at the heart of our approach. And what we're trying to achieve here is really grounded in the well-being of the people and the communities in this corridor, and about protecting the natural world for the future generations. And I think that's a pretty amazing foundation for us. And it's convinced me that when we think about infrastructure and productivity and urban mobility and so on, if we're serious about handing something really good on to the next generation, then we've got to start with thinking about quality.
Yeah, Minister, I think that's a fantastic last word. I really thank you for your participation in this. And people first, it's not bitumen and wires and pipes and so on and so forth. We're doing this to really change the well-being of a significant part of New Zealand, and it's new for us. So thank you very much. Look, we're pretty much out of time here. So I wanted to just wrap up and thank very much the panelists we've got. We could probably spend 6 to 8 hours on this. The purpose of this, as we said at the start, is really just to raise awareness of this. That's a pretty important and strategic conversation around a corridor, and having a conversation in a way that we've not had before. We shouldn't be talking about costs. We should be talking about value. That's a piece that we probably need to do more of here, because Kiwis are pretty fixated on it'll cost this much to put the light rail through, it'll cost this much to put the express rail or whatever through. But we're talking probably hundreds of billions of dollars worth of future business growth and homes here in this corridor. We also wanted to highlight some of those projects that are exemplars, but there will be many more. And I think there need to be multiple conversations and workshops on that. We would love to be a part of assisting with that, because this is new and different for New Zealanders. And finally, I think that, we've got an amazing toolkit that's happened again this week. Mayor Paula mentioned the Three Waters work. That will be transformational. The RMA work will be transformational. We have an urban development agency up and running. We have the infrastructure funding and financing piece up and running. And we also have the urban policy statement. That's all happened in about 5.5 seconds, but has been at least 3 years worth of slog and a lot of thinking before that. So I'd like to finish there with thanking all of the participants, all of our panelists and our members. We'll be carrying on conversations like this at Building Nations, Rebuilding Nations, we're calling it this year, which will be on the 14th and 15th of October. For all of our members and our guests, please look us up. And thank you once again to all of our panelists for dialing.